Hello, and welcome back to the Caregivers Journal podcast, where we're talking with real caregivers about their caregiving journeys. This month, we are honored to welcome Laurette Klier, the founder of Nana's Books. Welcome to Chapter 5 of the Caregivers Journal podcast. I am your co-host, Lance A. Slatton, along with my esteemed colleagues and co-hosts, Cindy and Christina Hardin-Weiss of the Adaptive Equipment Caregiving Corner. Welcome back, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are happy to be here.
Yes, we are. This is going to be an exciting episode.
Yes, it is. And we are joined by a good friend of ours, Laurette Klier. She is the founder of Nana's Books. Welcome back, Laurette.
Thanks so much. Happy to be here again and to be with all of you.
Always a joy.
Always a pleasure.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's like a family reunion.
That's right.
True that. Very true.
So, Laurette, I want to kind of talk about a little bit. You talk about, in the past, your mother-in-law's actually experienced living with Lewy body dementia and how it sparked the idea for Nana's Books. Tell us a little bit more about her personality and what her interests were like before the illness.
Okay. To back up, I didn't have a close relationship with her, in honesty. It wasn't a true, because we were living in Connecticut. She was living in Massachusetts. And my husband was her son, but the youngest of 6 kids. So he was younger by a great many years. And I really didn't know her very, very well because, again, I'd lived out of state with my husband and children. And what happened was when she went into memory care, prior to that, this was an assisted living initially. We would go, and she was becoming increasingly despondent and despairing, and it was becoming more and more difficult to talk with her. And then there were hallucinations that were coming in that had to do with childhood and boys throwing rocks at dogs and snowballs at dogs, and always had to do with children and being outside in her neighborhood. So that is kind of where the whole thing with these conversations started. And I thought, wow, this is kind of going to a dark place. So that was the catalyst, I would say, for some of these conversations. What she liked and what she was doing as a retiree and an empty nester for so many years was she played penny bridge every week with her girlfriends. She walked every day the coast of her hometown with friends. She was very engaged with, she always had a big dog, a golden retriever of one kind or another, and a big, big cat. And she just was a pleasant lady who liked her library, always had library books that she needed to return or that she was bringing back. And she read her daily papers and kept it pretty simple. And again, very uncomplicated person, and was married from the time she was 19. So I wouldn't say Arrested Development, but was one of these people who kind of was herself throughout. And that was a constant. So again, when these hallucinations and some of these, challenges were creeping in, I thought, wow, the Boston Globe is piling up. They're all still in the plastic sleeves by her door. And I thought, wow, what can we do? My son Michael was trying to show her different clips on his phone, and they were just too small. So what happened was that I thought maybe I could read aloud to her and just engage her in that way. And she seemed to like that. So again, there were no visuals, and it was just things that I was pulling up on my phone. And then I went home and I thought, maybe I can put together a little book for the next time we visit that has some of the visual cues to accompany the conversation. And that's really where this whole story began.
When, kind of drilling down a little more on your mother-in-law, because you guys didn't have the benefit of being close by, and maybe, I don't know how many times you would see her on average a year or so, do you think that helped you identify that there was something wrong sooner than if you lived close by? Because sometimes when you're right in the thick of it, people don't notice things as quickly. How was that experience like for you? Like, were there people close by that were giving you any insights, or was it just next time we went to grandma's, there was a big change and we knew something was wrong?
Actually true on both counts. So my sister-in-law Denise was there, and she lived in a nearby town, so she was there nearly daily, and we'd get feedback from her regularly. But your point is excellent. When you're not around, it's like seeing a teenager, and then 2 weeks later, they're 2 inches taller or 3 inches taller, and you think, wow. We had similar experiences. We would go and there would be these combined, I'd say, losses of let's say, function over time. So that was very apparent to us as we would go. But again, then we started to go increasingly regularly because she started to really bond with my daughter, Ingrid. So my husband would bring her up, or I would bring her up, and she would leave the place where she was living, and she would go and they would go get their nails done. They would go to a restaurant. We would take her for a haircut. And just we'd go to a pub, we'd take her for a walk, take her for an ice cream cone. So it was almost like the bonding was taking place at that stage. And we did see these aggregate losses over time.
Yeah. Yeah. So from that experience, from the Boston Globe piling up on the doorstep to you trying to read, or, your son trying to show her video clips, I'm assuming on the phone. And, where did you decide, what, there's got to be more, we got to have more help or engagement for her? Like what was that light bulb moment for you?
I can tell you exactly. When we would go get her, oftentimes she would be with a group of other women in the day room, and they'd be watching television. And I'd wait in the door frame with Ingrid or my husband, and she'd come over when she'd see us, and she'd light up. She'd have a big smile. And on her way out of the room, she'd say, well, you know what? Not everybody loves Raymond. And I thought, wow.
Wow.
Oh, she doesn't want to be in there watching television, and she doesn't want to watch the same show over and over again. And this is not for everybody. And, it's very engaging and entertaining. But as we talked about in the engagement certification and training that I just attended out in North Carolina with Teepa Snow, entertainment is not always engagement. And oftentimes it isn't. So that's a big takeaway. And I realized that she was possibly entertained, but really was not engaging with it. And I thought to myself, this woman there's so much more to her, and she's got such a light on. And I thought, what a shame, what a missed opportunity that she's parked in front of the television, and she's, and they're, you'd like to see people co-attending and conversing and doing those things. And they kind of were just parked alongside one another. And I thought, we have to do better. This isn't enough for people. And is it good for some? I'm sure, but for her, it was not. And I think she felt othered by it, and she felt demeaned by it. And it was not something she'd be doing in her own time or by her own volition.
And then that's where Nana's Books was born from? Is that incident?
I think that was part of it. I think I'd already kind of had the germ of an idea from prior visits. And then I think that just gelled because I thought she really doesn't want to be within, a group where they're not actively engaged. Like I said, she liked to play penny bridge, and they'd bring a paper bag, a brown paper bag lunch, and she would walk, and she would, she was involved. And I think that, she'd see the sea coast, and she just liked where she lived. And I don't think that being cooped up indoors, which is the nature of a memory care unit, and then watching TV with, a bunch of people that she didn't quite know or wasn't engaging with. And it was true across the board. There were a couple of ladies that were clutching their purses and things like that. And it was, they'd just come, the 20 yards from their room, let's say, down the hall. And I don't think that they engaged. And what a bunch of missed opportunities. What a shame, because they're all from the general area, I would imagine. And there was so much commonality. They'd lived rich, full lives, within close proximity to one another. Their backgrounds and their upbringings might have been quite similar, or, they would have had fertile ground for discussion, and none of that was happening. Yeah. So I thought, what a sad missed opportunity, and what a sad commentary on quote unquote engagement.
Yeah. Before I go to my final question and turn it over to Cindy, you talked about when you went to visit and the papers were piling up and things. When did the family decide, or what was that process like? Because I think a lot of family caregivers, they face this, kind of dilemma, if you will. Do we keep mom or dad in the home, or do we put them in a facility? And that's a tough decision, and there's a lot of factors that can play into it. when did you guys go from mom's going to stay here at the house to we can't support her staying in the house to putting her into a memory care facility? What were those conversations like? And, what were kind of some of the factors you took into account?
Well, in our case, as I said, my sister-in-law, Denise, was an angel, and she was kind of the boots on the ground carer. And what was happening is that my mother-in-law was getting into small scrapes with her car. So her driving definitely was. So that was job one, was to make sure she wasn't driving anymore because she was dinging up the car. And we thought we got lucky because this could have been so much worse. She could have harmed herself or someone else. So that was job one. And then things like leaving the kettle on to just the water would completely evaporate and the kettle would be practically on fire. So there wasn't a sentinel event necessarily that, something that happened, like, let's say she got locked out and, a neighbor called and said, like, they found her downtown. It wasn't quite like that. Mm-hmm. It was a combination of those types of things where we thought, you know what, she had a lift, one of those lifts for her staircase. And so she'd sleep upstairs and we had the lift for my father-in-law, took it out after he passed, had it put right back in because my mother-in-law needed that, the lift as well. And she just loved living in her home. It was just gracious and beautifully appointed. And she was happy there. And she had views from her a little matchstick view of the ocean from her bedroom window. And she just relished being there. And, who wouldn't? So I think it was very hard for my sisters-in-law to make that, that decision. And, along with my husband and his brothers to have her go into assisted living. But ironically, it was, I want to say 3/4 of a mile away. So it was very, very close by. So there were a few silver linings, but again, no sentinel event, but a lot of near misses and a lot of falls, that ended up thankfully being minor falls and ending up in the urgent care and a lot of UTIs. So again, it was the water on the rock where little by little, over time, the family saw that this being home and being home alone with some care coming and going wasn't enough anymore. It wasn't safe.
Yeah. Yeah. You talk about, kind of a shift in, your mother-in-law's responses to once Nana's books came out and you're starting to share them with her. Can you tell us a little bit more about that moment and how you knew that Nana was finally connecting? Because Nana's books is named after her. How that you finally decided and knew, okay, yeah, she's connecting with these books and we have something very beneficial for other families dealing with similar circumstances.
Yeah, again, I kind of have a clear picture of that as well. I always say in-laws, outlaws, everybody, we all called her Nana. So that was kind of, her name is Mary, but so we called her Nana Mary and the grandkids called her Nana Mary. My husband called her Mom, and as did his siblings. But I think the moment was when she was having these, she was looking out, there was an embankment behind where she was. It's like these stylized Victorians that are now, they're built to be, they're not converted, but they're built to be these assisted livings. And they're typically built on a main road, but an embankment in the backyard. So you kind of see the snow on the embankment. And if you look down below, 2 floors down or 3 floors down, there was a dumpster. And there was snowing on the dumpster. And she looked over at me and she started to tell me the story about the snowballs and the boys and how they'd run away. And it was like this mischievous kind of a thing they were doing. But she also, I could tell she kind of felt unsafe and they were throwing the snowballs at the dogs and things like that. And I thought, wow, she's in this. She really is in this moment with this hallucination and seeing this out the window. So I asked her to tell me about her old neighborhood and tell me about the bad boys in the neighborhood and tell me about her friends in the neighborhood, in the old neighborhood. And then she kind of tangentially got off on this, side conversation about her friend Pinky, who stole everybody's boyfriends. And I thought, this is hilarious. And she got very specific about, my father-in-law was one of 13 and 11 surviving kids, and he was an identical twin, and there was a set of fraternal twins. So he had a big family in the neighborhood, as did she in South Boston. So they kind of were like these kids that were roaming the neighborhood as like young teens, and all these stories about date nights and how my father-in-law would have to steal a pressed shirt from his twin brother Paul's Foot Locker to go on, take her on a date. And honestly, I would listen to her and she would expound for a solid hour, and she was a riot. And I thought, I have never seen this side of her. This is so refreshing. And I just loved to see her eyes light up like that. And then what happened was, is I put together, I went online and I found all these old pictures that were surely in the public domain because they were like 1890s. And I put them, honestly, I didn't even have a Mac. I had a PC and I was making like photocopies. And then I was taking some of the verse and some of the, the Irish wit and wisdom. So I put a book together and brought it back to her because I thought she's going to crack up. So I did that. And, it was my little, my manila folder, and off we went. And she was pointing and she was gesticulating like mad, and she was telling stories, and her hair was standing on end. And I thought, she's a riot. And my husband always told me that he'd get up in the morning when he went to high school, and they'd sit and have breakfast together every day. And she'd always stand at the counter and she'd eat her brown bread with butter, and she'd have her coffee. And he just said he loved her company and she was so much fun. And I thought, I am not seeing it with this woman at all. But sure enough, that side of her came out. And again, I started to make these little books that were, around these types of things that she liked. Then another thing, I think that because she was raised, they were poor, they lived, in the city, and she had, her dad had passed when she was younger, and her mom was raising the children alone. So art was something that she loved but didn't have access to. So I don't know if you all remember in the malls and things like that, the Bombay Company came about. So they had reproduction art. So she'd buy paintings with like the mahogany, quote unquote mahogany, or the gilt frames from the Bombay Company, and she'd have them around her house. And she loved some of this art, and some of it was great, like art. She buys art down the Cape, some beautiful local watercolors of like these beach wagons and all these other things, and these jitneys. And she just loved a little bit of art. So she had some nice watercolors too. And I thought, you know what, maybe I could take some art and bring that in. Mm-hmm. And she really loved that too. And she would make comments about, the different, modalities and just the different techniques. And we just talked about a lot of that. And she just was seeking beauty. I think that she had so little of it growing up. It was so bleak that she was seeking beauty. And I thought, I'm going to find that too.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what happened.
That's great, Laurette. I just want to say before I pass to Cindy, I love the Bombay Company. One of my, I have a couple of offices, and in one of my offices, I have a Bombay desk. Best desk ever. Yeah,
it was great stuff. I mean, it was short-lived, but it had its moment. And, and I believe that she even had in her bedroom one of those tall, narrow, skinny, remember it was like very popular in the 80s where you could put all your jewelry in it. It was not a jewelry box that you put on your bureau. It was a jewelry box that stood on the ground. And it had like these small, it was almost like an apothecary's chest, and it had these small compartments. And she definitely was, in her later years, she had means by then, seeking like the beautiful and like getting involved in some of these things. And it was so sweet because it was new to her.
Yeah.
And she loved it. And again, in the end, we were utterly charmed by her. We were. And initially, not so much.
Yeah.
So there's so much joy and so much that you can, just Marilyn Rakel of Maud's Awards, she talks about her mom who became a painter in her later years. We're talking about like 90s and how she just blossomed into this artist.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so arts are so powerful for people with, dementia and cognitive decline. Our good friend Lori LeBay has a segment, Dementia and the Arts. I highly recommend people check that out too. Well, Cindy, we'll turn it over to you guys, and let's hear what you have to say.
Yeah, so Laurette, when we first met you, and I think you've gone through some of the frustrations, and we hear this from a lot of family members, the frustrations in the dementia units and the lack of activities or appropriate activities. It's interesting. We've worked in long-term care, and I know Christina has some stories about, finding that thing that somebody used to do or was always involved in trying to develop that. We really love your books. The imagery, it's so, they're so vivid. What is your thought on, so when you're creating those, I like how you're kind of looking at, what was available during that time frame as far as age related things. But is there anything that you have found from hearing from feedback and things like that that helps guide you and connect you on what you're going to produce or what you did produce or what's coming next?
Absolutely. So initially, it's all the inspiration comes from. It's an invitation. Truly, it comes from a request from somebody that says, "What do you have for veterans? Do you have anything for?" My mom is a Buddhist, or my mom. She loves to say her rosary in the morning. So many faith-based things cropped up because it's so important to people that it be identity-based and it be something that resonates with them. So honestly, that organic role, I never thought I'd be doing this work. I never thought Nana's books would be anything but me with my manila folder.
Nice.
So here we are. And I just derive so much joy from seeing people sharing the books and things like that. So, but to answer your question regarding like criteria and how I decide and where do I get the art, what happened is I was, again, seeing common threads. And a common thread was genre art. And all that really means is that it's art that has to do with, they started, with the Dutch masters in, let's say, the 17th century. And what genre art really just means is that it's in the scope of an average person's day. So hanging out the washing, bringing home baby, preparing the family meal, taking a walk down the lane, first loves, all of that. So I really focus on genre art because it's that common thread that binds people, and it doesn't matter your socioeconomic situation or where you live in the world. Any of those things, they all don't matter because it's about the road of life. So the first book that I did was Life's Journeys, and it's all poetry that men, women, children, that surrounds the journey on the road of life. So again, really deep into genre art. I do like a lot of humor. Do some things with some vintage photographs, and the pairings are so important to me. And I have all these people think like, oh, she just goes on Pinterest and she pulls things. Absolutely not. First of all, the clearances and the image, just to be able to upscale the images and to use them. Some of them are damaged, just a lot of different things. But my criteria have to do with, will this impart joy? Will this give people a sense of belonging in the world at large? The greater, were they part of the greater good? What are they leaving behind? What are things they might miss? And then I take out, so it's nostalgia based, but I take out the reminiscence, and people say, well, what's the difference? The difference is in reminiscence therapy, which has been statistically and through research found to be less robust for people. It has a trauma-based element into it because there's stories. So it's your pictures of your past, or your communion, or your wedding, or your New Year's Eve and the day that your father didn't come back, or you were disappointed by a vacation that didn't happen, or you went somewhere and something. So it triggers a cascade of memories. So reminiscence therapy, for some, is wonderful and helpful, but it's also got the element of trauma. And because in long-term care settings and in home settings, we don't have a skilled clinician on site, nostalgia is evergreen and it's thematic, and it has the elements of, let's say, your Halloween's past, or any of the different, graduations, or any of the different milestones. And you can embroider as you like, or include as you like, or omit as you like. You, as the person living with dementia or the care partner, you take control, and you've got creative license in that way. And it prompts you with the visual and auditory cues. So important for people that are living with expressive language challenges and people that are struggling with word finding. Mm-hmm. So these are really very scientifically designed. And I've gone in deep into cognitive stimulation therapy with University College London. I've worked with Dr. Fong Lung, who pioneered that modality, and now it's coming to the US through social prescribing, which I love. And also really looking deeply into the DEEP guide, the DEEP guide, which is out of the UK as well. And it has to do with the layouts of the page and the fonts and the letter spacing and the line spacing. And so there's a true science to it. And I was not aware of that. I actually went back and modified all my books. I found a hyperlegible font that Fast Company awarded in 2019 with, an award for through the Braille Association for being the most legible font, out there. So again, and then I went back and decided every one of these books needs a conversation guide, but it can't be based in questions. I don't want it to be an interrogation. So I went back and added a conversation guide to every single book to help people. There's no materials required, but it's so that you can structure a conversation, and it has to do with let's find, almost like an I Spy, or you can take a picture walk, or I make declarative statements, or did you know kind of things. And then also at the end, I give an author share in every book, and I talk a little bit about myself and my recollections or my experiences, because sometimes when you go visit a loved one after work, or you're in a transition, you just don't have it in the tank to come up with conversation. And sometimes if you don't know the person that well, you may not be inclined to share. So I put all those elements in a conversation guide, up the science on all of this. And I've just been trying to refine these books. I've just sent you some recent books and access to the digital library. So just refining everything, putting an eyelash border around all the photographs, and upping the pixels and the enhancing the images. Like, I will not stop until these books are perfect for people. It matters.
That's awesome.
So I'm going to hop in here, Sid, if you don't mind.
Right.
So with you, it sounds like with nostalgia, or not even nostalgia, but the reminiscing theory, you've learned so much about it, and you're putting so much into it. And you're hitting not only what Nana was interested in, but it sounds like you're hitting a lot of other nostalgic things for a lot of people. That's kind of your goal. Do you have any kind of stories that kind of stand out to you? Any anecdotes that stand out to you in particular about hitting those themes? Maybe people that have reached out to you saying, man, my mom really loved this. You really hit the mark on this, that you could share with us?
I do. The most recent was the other day, and I pulled it up on my phone so I can read it to you verbatim. I've got a reader in Canada, I believe in the Calgary area, and her mom is in long-term care. Her mom is an editor, book editor, so she's got plenty to say about Nana's books. She loves the books and she enjoys them, but she still reads, and she reads in multiple languages. But so she's a bright lady with the light on. So to give her something that, let's say, would be infantilizing, or that would be juvenile in nature, it just wouldn't serve her. So she definitely has, like anybody living with dementia, she's at different gem states at different times of day or different times of the week, or she may go through periods of time where she's really, she's very cogent and she's very, very clear. And then there are other times where not so much, or she's more emotional, or she's got, other issues, let's say perseverative loops and things like that, that really for me are just, it's almost like a bid for some type of a change of something, or an enhanced connection or something like that. So when her daughter Saskia reaches out to me, she always has something, and she's on Instagram, and it's called Dementia Notes. I encourage you all to follow her. I love her stuff. And you can see this quote on Instagram. But so this is her most recent message to me, which I thought was so neat. She has a book that has to do with Rumi and about divine arrangement. So they are flower arrangements from all over the world, oil paintings, watercolors, but they're from years and years past, and they're really neat combinations of gorgeous flowers. And Rumi is just the philosopher. It's just very deep and simple and elemental. So her mom liked it, and she said, another awesome book by Nana's Books. This page in particular captured our attention. My mom remarked that Van Gogh's sunflowers were notable because he painted not just the beautiful, idealized ones, but also the ones traditionally considered imperfect. Seems like a good reminder in an age where social media taunts us with its glimpses of perfectly captured, curated moments. Here's to finding the beauty in the discarded and the unconventional.
Wow.
And aren't we all unconventional? Aren't we?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So to feel seen like that, I honestly, like, with all the challenges of being a quote unquote solopreneur, I didn't even know what that was. Messages like that keep me going. And, and then I've got some other, I'm going to my brother's, he's got a beach house, which he is a couple doors down from my parents' house. So we can just come and go from there and use it as we like, which is delightful. And their neighbor, Janet, had a massive stroke a couple of years ago, and she is a watercolorist. And she loves Nana's books. I bring them, and I do this bread in a, what do you call those Dutch ovens? So I bring a loaf of bread over, and we just sit, and we literally, like my mother-in-law, we used to eat the cold pizza. We sit and have the bread, mostly her husband and I, he's like her full-time care partner. But she loves the art books, and she's a grandmother. So she likes the books of the babies and the children doing what babies do. And it's wordless. So for somebody that had a stroke, a massive stroke, she has it in the front basket of her, I guess her cart. I'm not sure, but it's a modified wheelchair, and she kind of patrols the strip. And so so it's so cool to go out there and see, like, she's got the haiku book, and she likes all the ones that have to do with nature and the beauty of nature. So Janet is an advisor of mine because what she likes matters. So she did a portrait, is that what you call it, of my brother's house, because they're next door neighbors. And typically she could have banged that out in a weekend. It took her 1 year because of the stroke, and they have it hung proudly, and it is beautiful in their dining room, which just looks right out the window at her house. So that she's a fan of Nana's books, and that's nice feedback. And then there's something else I wanted to mention. And then veterans that have these coffee houses, and they gather around, and they've got, their battered books, and some of them write in the books, and they kind of connect around the topics, because they're prompted by, let's say it has to do with, it's a VFW. They'll grab their coffee, and they'll go sit together, and they'll chat it out for quite some time. So that's wonderful too.
That is awesome. Great. So wonderful. Do you want to go?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, we are just so impressed with everything that we've seen from the books. It's just, even looking through them, it's just that heartwarming, peaceful type of feeling whenever you're looking through and
I mean, that's the nostalgia, huh?
Yeah, I think that is. I think that is. But yeah, I think, with what you're doing, I love the fact that you are taking to heart people that are responding and trying to develop. I just can't believe all of the effort and energy to make these books as perfect as you can for as many people as you can. Is just, I love it.
What's your background, Laurette? I mean, you talk so much about art, and I'm like, well, I took a few art courses in college and stuff, but I mean, the way you talk about it, it sounds like is it on the job training, or do you have a background in art?
A little bit of both. So I went to college for initially speech communications, and did a lot with, challenges to, let's say the anatomy and physiology of the vocal mechanisms. So like you, Cindy, I had some of that background, but didn't go on to become a speech, therapist, a speech pathologist. So I had a background in speech, and then I went back and got my master's in education. And a lot of it had to do with literacy and emergent literacy and literacy environments, and resourcing kids who were at risk for, not learning how to read, or at risk for a variety of reasons. So I started to write grants for kids in urban and priority schools to get them involved in get out inter-district grants. So they would get out of their district, and they'd go to, let's say, a suburban district, and they would also say they would do academic programming together across district lines. And a lot of that had to do with arts experiences, and actually science experiences as well. So that is kind of where I was resourcing my students when I was teaching. I taught first grade, and I taught fourth grade in Massachusetts and then in Connecticut, but I really was focused on literature and the arts as a vehicle. So whereas most people, children of that age, they start with a bottom-up approach. So it's phonics, and it's diagramming sentences, or breaking down sentences, or schwa, and, the different vowel, consonant, vowel combinations, and all those different things. I took a completely different approach. It came from the kids' interests. So if we needed to start from Captain Underpants, or the X-Men comic books, or whatever, so their interests were here.
Mhm.
and their reading ability independently was down here. So what was the scaffold that would go in between? So sometimes I would take the books and modify the books so that they'd be high interest, they'd be self-selected, but they'd be modified in such a way that they could engage and feel successful.
Yeah.
And so I've been doing this unbeknownst to me for 30 years. And then it kind of just morphed into doing it in the elder space.
Mm-hmm.
So and as far as an arts background, my minor in college was Italian studies, but honestly, wherever I go, whenever I travel, the first thing I do is go to cathedrals and museums. And I would say I was raised Catholic, but I would say I'm, Christian. And I just really feel that I went to a Jesuit university, also went there for graduate school. I really feel that the divine is within all of us. Mm-hmm. And I think to tease that out and to bring that to the surface with people, particularly who are having trouble communicating, I think it's one of our greatest challenges and one of our greatest joys if we can do that. So to find work in this space is such a gift in my life. So it's a lot of things coming together at one time, and I feel really fortunate.
That's fantastic.
Awesome.
I want to shift gears just a little bit here, Laurette. Reading through your biography that you sent, and that some research that I've done online about you, you talk about being a senior advocate and working on legislation. How does Nana's books fit into that broader mission to support caregivers? And can you talk a little bit about the legislation itself?
Sure. So starting with the end, there is currently an Essential Caregivers Act, and it was established to ensure unfettered access for a family caregiver to be able to get into long-term care settings because of the pandemic, when families were locked out, for vulnerable people. So it's not just elders, it's for people. If your child is in, let's say a hospital setting for, anything, cerebral palsy or any of the different reasons why you'd be in long-term care, the fact that your mother or your husband, you're the dad or a husband of someone that has dementia would be locked out and couldn't get in to advocate and do the daily, to give the person their dignity and feel that connection and feel tethered to this world with, your care and that love. That was, I think, really devastating. And I've connected with people here in Connecticut that are just powerhouses. And we have bipartisan support here. Christopher Murphy, our state senator, is really very, very involved and has been supportive. So it's got momentum nationally. And this is something that there are two different organizations, the Connecticut 911, because isolation kills too, that started during the pandemic. And there's another group that is Connecticut Caregivers for Compromise. Again, these are just people that have had someone in care and realize, listen, if someone can't go in to feed my mom, she's not going to thrive. And it's bad for her, or she won't be able to, just for basics, brush her teeth or toileting or any of the things that just are just human, absolutes. And you just need to have, and you need to have that care, even if, and these people that are working in these settings are angels and they're so overburdened as it is. These family caregivers, they not just benefit their family, their loved one, they also benefit, the lovely caring people that are doing this, this yeoman's work, this women's work. So
yeah,
it's very important to me that this legislation passes, because if this ever happens again, this loss of life and this loss of dignity and purpose, it just can't stand.
Absolutely.
Yep. Totally agree with that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have got one more question, Laurette, and it says, and what it is living with dementia can be a long goodbye. Some people refer to it as a long goodbye. How did Nana's books help you navigate your relationship with your mother-in-law as her condition progressed?
Wow. Christina, that's a tough one. She passed during COVID. So she kind of went, she went the distance, and she passed right at the very end of COVID when, the restrictions were lifting. So that was sad, because she would not have gone when she did, and she would not have gone in the way that she did had it not been for the pandemic and the lockdowns. What we had to do as a family is that we needed to fight to get her into hospice, which her needs changed so dramatically from needing assisted living to really needing skilled nursing during the pandemic. And we weren't able to see that. We'd have a patio visit or through a window and these things. So we moved her into hospice, and with peace in her heart and with her children and grandchildren being allowed in, 6 kids, 14 grandkids, she passed 4 days later. It was just one of those things where she almost needed a safe place to let go and to be able to say her goodbyes. And that should never be, that set of circumstances should never be. So that is something that, I think my husband grapples with. Could we have done better by her? Could we have done this differently? I think that a lot of families are feeling that way, that had to say goodbye on Zoom or just on a regular landline, voice call. So that is something that I struggle with. But something that gives me a lot of peace is that when people say, what are you doing with books? People are so short-staffed. They're so short-handed in care. It's just going to increase caregiver burden. Absolutely not. Quite the contrary, because people can peruse their books at their leisure. They're ad-free. There's nothing asked of them. They're on their cognitive level. They can self-select among a variety of different things. It's not embedded in some sort of a program. It's just something that you can have on hand, let's say, in the middle of the night. And I've got pictures. Mom wants to get up and page through her different books, just like we all do in our homes.
Right.
People need to have access on that level. So it's not just, when people talk about access to any of the different, like, let's say, books or media in care, it's not just in the day room on Mondays and Wednesdays from 1 to 2:30. That's not access. This is true, organic, authentic leisure reading in place. I believe in it. Mirador Magazine believes in it. Resense, the Resense Register, the broadsheet newspaper that Luke Gilligan's doing in Pittsburgh, he believes in this leisure reading. None of us are making a fortune doing this work. It is honestly, we are bootstrapping. It is a labor of love. And we know that it doesn't increase caregiver burden. We know that it gives people that modality that they're familiar with, that they feel comfortable with. And, Kellen Lee, a doctor in the UK, talks about material citizenship. And your books and your magazines and your religious iconography and your the doily on the back of your love seat, those are things that belong to you. Those belong to you. That is a patient right. That is a human right. So to be able to have books and magazines that you can engage with that are at your developmental level right now, it's a non-negotiable.
Agreed.
And it's not a nice to have. It is elemental to people. And that's what I'm really hoping that comes across, and that people start to understand that there are creators in this space that are doing this. And it's all a matter of, we want people to have the best, not a cast off, not an old shelter magazine. Like, don't give your mom Travel and Leisure and it's from 2012. She's not traveling anymore. It's not. It's so laden with ads, or a dusty magazine or a children's board book. We can do so much better.
Yeah, agreed. And your books are great for that, Laurette. That it's that person-centered activity. See what your loved one gravitates towards. Give them an option to leaf through the books. See what they gravitate towards. Then find out and sit down next to them. Even if they don't have the ability to communicate verbally anymore, that doesn't make them any less of a communicative human being. They still need that give and take, that, I say something, you say something. And what a great way to, even if it's just pointing at pictures and making that that nonverbal nod and going,
right.
That's validating. That's validating. I think your books are great for that. So I applaud you and appreciate everything that you've done for this community.
Thank you so much. I feel like it's a pleasure. And again, it's a privilege to work with people at this time in life when they're in life review, and to give them the the tools for togetherness, the tools that they need to be able to re-engage. And again, I hope that this at some point, reaches its audience, and day by day, it's a pioneering thing. It's not something that people really quite grasp yet, and that's okay. I hope that it happens sooner rather than later. So I started in March of 2019. So we're coming up on 5 years, and I talk to people, and relatively speaking, that's a short creator's journey. Some days it feels like longer than that, but I do believe that given the right tools, particularly at end of life, I think people talk about engagement, so it has to do with hands-on activities and the drumming on the yoga balls, which is wonderful. People love that. There are all these great chair aerobics, and there are crafts, and there's all kinds of modified, as you all know, in the adaptive equipment world. There's so many great things happening in engagement, which I love. But for people that are in later stages, that are amber, garnet, pearl stages, later stages that are non-ambulatory, non-verbal, to be able to be engaged with in this way, and just to hear and to see some of these reminiscent images of the story of your life,
Right.
is engagement in itself. And I really am focused on the life review component, whether you're in life review, whether you're in cognitive decline or cognitive change. It doesn't matter whether or not you're looking back on your life and saying, like, what was this all about? What did I do? What was my contribution? And you're thinking about legacy. And also, it's a great way to bond with young people who are, they're just parsing and sorting what their life will be. So there's so much wisdom to be imparted. And again, you don't need to be engaged with, let's say, a craft. Some of this story and passing the talking stick and passing the mantle to the next generation, and all this wisdom, let's not waste it. Let's not waste it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I've got one more question, Laurette, that just kind of popped into my mind. So besides the pictures, some of your books do have poetry, or they have, quotes or something along those lines. And that can be so helpful too. I mean, there might be a poem that maybe a person has heard their entire life,
Right.
How did you go about making that decision about what quote or what poem might go with what picture?
I really thought, everything that I choose, I really think, will this validate? Will this give someone a sense of peace? I just did one of the books. I don't know if there's the Rumi book that I sent you, but also I went to the New York Orchid Show. I go every year at the Bronx Botanic Gardens, and I took pictures of high resolution photographs of the orchids, very close up, but there's so many, and the colors are so great. And it's all about meditation, but it has to do with, mantras. So the mantras that I chose, some of them are very long. Some of them are in, obviously they are in Sanskrit, but some, they're translated to English. So I picked the ones that had to do with what would give someone who is departing this life and they're close to the veil, right? The one side is birth, and the other side of the veil. And again, you're very vulnerable at either side of the veil. So what would give someone at this side of the veil who's just passing through and is about to pass through, what would give them a sense of peace in their heart? And what do they need to know or ask or contemplate prior to doing that? And that's really my criteria is will this give you peace and joy, affirmation, and a window into the divine within yourself and within others before you go? That's it.
Love that.
So inspirational.
Love that. Absolutely.
Well, I want to jump in as we close out here, Laurette, and thank you again. It's always great to see you, and just applaud the tremendous work you're doing at Nana's Books. But let's pretend for a moment that you could go back and talk to yourself before there was a Nana's Books, because we get a lot of family caregivers who are, they're new to this space. That's overwhelming. There's so many different options, choices, programs, thoughts and ideas. what is the one piece of advice you wish you could go back and tell yourself back then if you had that ability to do so?
Regarding creating the books, or as being a caregiver, or
A caregiver, yeah. What would be what's
yeah.
your number one tip for Laurette, the new family caregiver?
I'd say life is a patchwork of moments. And I think that the little, bringing your spouse, a nice coffee in bed on a hot day. I'm thinking in terms of my husband today before he headed out for the day, or, just taking that moment, stomping puddles when your kids are little, or it's all fleeting. Grab it. So when you're a caregiver, whether it's to littles or to, your elders, or to, let's say, your husband with FTD, there are dark moments, there are challenging moments. They're all part of the patchwork and the bigger picture. And, don't postpone joy. Grab it.
Okay. All right. One of my favorite is you're never alone, because I feel like for a lot of family caregivers, the countless support groups that we facilitate here in Michigan, probably the number one theme with so many of these first time or new family caregivers, if you will, is they feel like they're the only ones going through it, and that they don't have friends that have gone through it or are going through it. And they feel like there's no one that understands what they're dealing with. And, we just reassure them you're not alone. And then probably my 1B, if that's my 1A, would be, practice self-care. Take time for yourself. Don't neglect your diet, your medical, your health, all of your extracurriculars. Find ways to incorporate that, even if it's 5 minutes to go on the porch and read a book, or, whatever the case may be, because you have to be at your best so that you can provide that care for that family member or loved one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cindy, Christina, you got any favorite tips for new caregivers that you want to add? I know we're about to show your caregiver tip of the month video here in a minute when we close, but otherwise, do you have any favorite tips you like to share with family caregivers?
Yeah, my tried and true tip always is, when you are a caregiver, try to let your loved one do as much as they can, because that's going to help them with their dignity and their independence, and it's also going to help you as a caregiver.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us here at the Caregivers Journal, chapter number 5. Laurette, always good to see you, and thank you for all the work you're doing at Nana's Books. Cindy, Christina,
Thank you.
Always a pleasure to see you guys. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Christina here, speech therapist with Adaptive Equipment and Caregiving Corner. Today, we're going to take a look at a product called Nana's Books. These products were sent to us by Laurette Klier, founder and curator of Nana's Books. If you find this video helpful, be sure to like and share on Facebook and Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check us out at aecorner.com. So let's get started. Laurette was inspired by her mother-in-law, Mary, to create Nana's Books. Laurette and her family regularly visited Nana Mary, who lived in a memory care community. During one visit, Laurette noticed Nana Mary speaking clearly and passionately about her young adulthood. Laurette also knew Nana Mary was a lover of reading, everything from mystery novels to daily newspapers. That's when it clicked. Laurette decided to create material designed to engage individuals living with dementia. Laurette said it best when she said, "I wanted to create something that could be enjoyed at any stage of dementia, independently now or shared and read aloud in later stages. I guess I wanted Nana to have what we all so deeply need, to feel seen and relevant, revered and understood." Let's take a look at this special collection. This set includes 30 books full of nostalgic photographs and beautiful reproductions of memorable artwork. This collection is available in paperback, hardcover, and spiral bound. There's even a digital edition. Nana's Books are great for reminiscing, co-attending, and enhancing relationships with a loved one with mild cognitive impairment or dementia. Research suggests that shared reading builds connection, combats loneliness, and enriches our loved ones' daily lives. So have a seat next to your loved one and flip through page after page of beautiful pictures. Share thoughts and memories that come to mind as you read aloud the literature, poetry, and words of praise that accompany each picture. AE Corner joyfully recommends Nana's books. This collection is great for family caregivers, life enrichment staff, memory care communities, speech therapists, and dementia care specialists. Be sure to check out the links below for further details. That's it for today from Adaptive Equipment and Caregiving Corner. Have a great day, and don't forget, if you can't do it, adapt it.
Thank you for joining us here at the Caregivers Journal podcast, where we're talking with real caregivers about their caregiving journeys. We look forward to seeing you again next month.